Most people will tell you that the first million is the hardest. They are wrong. The hardest part of the journey isn't the final stretch towards 7 figures. It isn't the last $100,000, or the moment you finally see that 6-0 balance in your account. The real battle, the one where most dreams go to die, happens long before you ever get close to that $1 million mark. It happens right before you hit $200,000. This is the invisible wall. It is a psychological and mathematical dead zone where progress feels so slow, so painful, and so utterly invisible that your brain starts screaming at you to quit. And most people do. They walk away from the table exactly when the game is about to get easy. If you are sitting there looking at your portfolio today and wondering why it feels like you are pushing a mountain with a toothpick, you aren't doing anything wrong. You are just in the middle of the grind that no one talks about. We see the success stories on social media. We see the overnight millionaires and the flashy returns. But we never see the 10 to 15 years of absolute silence that come before it. We don't see the decade of disciplined saving that produces almost no visible results. That period is the financial equivalent of a desert, and $200,000 is the oasis on the other side. But because the desert is so vast, most travelers turn back halfway through, convinced that the water doesn't exist. Think about the way we are taught to perceive progress. We are linear creatures living in an exponential world. If you save $500 a month, your brain expects to see a steady, satisfying climb. But money doesn't work that way. For the first decade, your contributions are doing all the heavy lifting. You are the engine. You are the fuel. You are the tires hitting the pavement. Your money is just sitting there, barely waking up. When you have $20,000, a 10% return is only $2,000. That doesn't change your life. It doesn't pay your rent. It doesn't even buy a decent used car. It feels like a rounding error. So you keep working. You keep sacrificing. You skip the vacations. You drive the older car. You say no to the expensive dinners. And for what? So your balance can go from $20,000 to $22,000? This is where the middle-class trap begins to close its jaws. You start to feel the weight of the sacrifice, but you don't feel the lift of the reward. This is the danger zone. This is where the investing is a scam narrative starts to sound logical. You see your friends spending their money on new houses, designer clothes, and luxury travel. You see them enjoying their lives today while you are hoarding money for a future that feels like a fantasy. The psychological pressure to fit in and the lack of immediate feedback create a perfect storm of discouragement. You start to think that maybe you should just enjoy your money now. You think that if it's going to take 30 years to reach freedom, you might as well be comfortable today. But here is what they don't tell you about the math. There is a specific point where the momentum shifts. There is a moment where your money stops being a lazy passenger and starts becoming a dedicated employee. And for the average person, that shift begins to accelerate aggressively as you approach $200,000. Up until that point, you are working for your money. After that point, your money starts working for you. If you quit at $50,000 or $80,000 or even $100,000, you are quitting while you are still doing 100% of the work. You are leaving right before your partner shows up to help you carry the load. Imagine you are building a massive stone cathedral by hand. For years, all you are doing is carving individual blocks and stacking them one by one. The building doesn't look like a cathedral. It looks like a pile of rocks. People walk by and laugh. They ask why you are wasting your time. You are tired, your hands are bleeding, and the structure is barely waist high. But you keep going. You reach a point where the foundation is set. You reach the point where the arches begin to support themselves. Suddenly, the physics of the structure take over. The weight of the stone starts to create its own stability. That is exactly what happens when you hit that $200,000 milestone. The physics of compound interest start to override your manual labor. The reason this milestone is so magic isn't just because of the number itself. It's because of what it represents in terms of time. Most people look at 200,000 and think, I'm only 20% of the way there. They see $1 million as the summit, and they realize they still have $800,000 to go. It feels impossible, but in the world of compounding, the dollar amount is the least important metric. The only metric that matters is time. And if you look at the timeline of a typical investing career, $200,000 isn't the 20% mark. It is the 50% mark. By the time you hit that number, you have already climbed the steepest, most treacherous part of the mountain. You have already survived the phase where failure is most likely. You have built the habit. You have developed the discipline. And most importantly, you have given your money enough mass to start generating its own gravity. When you have $200,000 invested, a simple 7% return is $14,000 a year. That is over $1,000 a month being generated out of thin air. You aren't working for that $1,000. You aren't trading your time for it. You aren't dealing with a boss for it. It just appears because you had the courage to stay the course when everyone else was calling you crazy. But getting to that $14,000 of free money requires you to walk through the valley of disappointment. This is the gap between what we think should happen and what actually happens in the early years. In the beginning, your expectations are high, but the actual growth of your portfolio is nearly flat. The gap between your expectations and reality is where most investors quit. They see the gap and they fill it with doubt. They fill it with excuses. They tell themselves the market is rigged, or they started too late, or they don't make enough money. They don't realize that the gap is a mandatory part of the process. You cannot have the explosion of growth in year 25 without the agonizing silence of year 5. Every dollar you invest in your 20s and 30s is like a seed. If you plant a tree, you don't go out the next morning and yell at the dirt because there's no shade. You understand that the roots have to grow deep before the branches can grow high. But for some reason, when it comes to our finances, we expect instant shade. We want the millionaire lifestyle before we've even finished the 200,000 foundation. When we don't get it, we pull up the seeds and move on to the next get-rich-quick scheme, never realizing that we were just months away from the first sprout breaking through the soil. The middle-class trap is designed to keep you in this cycle of constant starting and stopping. It's fueled by a culture of consumption that demands your attention and your capital. Every advertisement you see is a nudge to pull a seed out of your garden and spend it on something that will be in a landfill in 5 years. They want you to stay below that magic milestone, because as long as you are below it, you are dependent. You are a worker who needs a paycheck. But once you cross that line, you start to become something else. You start to become an owner. You start to become someone who can survive without the machine. And the machine doesn't like that. The path to wealth is not about being a genius. It isn't about picking the perfect stock or timing the market perfectly. It is about being the person who refuses to quit when the math feels like it isn't working. It is about having the vision to see $1 million when your account only shows 50,000. It is about understanding that the first 6 figures are a test of character, and the second 6 figures are a reward for passing that test. When you look at the numbers, the acceleration is almost hard to believe. The time it takes to go from 0 to 100,000 is often longer than the time it takes to go from 100,000 to 500,000. The first 100,000 is a grueling uphill battle. It's a test of how much you can sacrifice. But once you clear that hurdle and push toward the 200,000 mark, the hill starts to level out. You begin to pick up speed. The effort required to keep the momentum going becomes less and less. If you are currently in that slow grind phase, you need to change your perspective. Stop looking at the gap between where you are and $1 million. Start looking at the gap between where you are and 200,000. That is your real target. That is the threshold of freedom. Once you cross that line, the gravity of wealth will do more to pull you toward the finish line than your own effort ever could. The reason most people aren't wealthy isn't that they didn't have the opportunity. It's that they didn't have the patience to wait for the math to start working in their favor. They quit in the darkness, never knowing that the dawn was just a few steps away. Is $200,000 the most important number in your financial life? Most people think the first million is the ultimate goal, but the truth is far more surprising. In this video, we break down why the journey to $200,000 is the real make or break phase for every investor, and why so many people quit exactly when they are on the verge of a breakthrough. We explore the invisible wall of compounding, the psychological traps of the middle class, and the mathematical proof that once you hit this magic milestone, your money begins to do more work than you ever could. If you've been feeling discouraged by slow progress or wondering if your sacrifices are worth it, this deep dive into the physics of wealth will change how you look at your portfolio forever. Stop focusing on the $1 million finish line and start understanding the momentum of the $200,000 tipping point.